The rain hammered against the windshield as Richard Coleman sat in his black Mercedes, watching the three men circle Elena like wolves around their prey. His heart pounded against his ribs as he witnessed his trusted housekeeper pressed against the brick wall of the abandoned parking garage, her usually composed face twisted with fear. One of the men grabbed her wrist, yanking her forward while another leaned close enough that Richard could see Elena's body trembling even from 50 feet away. The third man kept looking around, his movements sharp and threatening. Richard had followed Elena on a whim after she left his penthouse, curious about where someone so dedicated to her work spent her evenings. He never expected to stumble into what looked like a scene from his worst nightmares. Richard Coleman had always considered himself a good judge of character. At 45, he had built a tech empire worth $300 million by reading people, understanding their motivations and predicting their next moves. But as he watched Elena Rodriguez, the woman who had cleaned his penthouse, prepared his meals, and managed his household for the past 2 years being cornered by three dangerous-looking men, he realized he knew nothing about her real life. Elena had always been punctual, efficient, and almost invisible in the way she went about her work. She arrived at 7 in the morning, left at 6 in the evening, and in between she transformed his cold penthouse into something that felt almost like a home. She never asked personal questions, never lingered longer than necessary, and never gave him any reason to think about her life beyond his walls. But tonight something had been different. He had been working late in his home office when he saw Elena through his window, hurrying down the street with her coat pulled tight around her. There was urgency in her steps that he had never seen before, a tension in her shoulders that made him curious. Before he could stop himself, he had grabbed his keys and followed her. The chase had led him through downtown, past the expensive restaurants and boutique shops of his neighborhood, into an area of the city he rarely visited. The buildings grew shorter and shabbier, the streetlights dimmer, and the people on the sidewalks moved with the careful awareness of those who understood danger. Elena had parked her old Honda Civic in an abandoned lot beside a warehouse that looked like it had been empty for years. Richard had hung back, parking behind a dumpster where he could watch without being seen. He expected her to meet a friend, maybe grab dinner at one of the small restaurants nearby. He had already started feeling foolish for following her when the three men appeared. They had seemed to come from nowhere, stepping out of the shadows between buildings like they had been waiting. Elena had tried to run, but they moved faster, cornering her against the brick wall where Richard now watched in horror. The man holding Elena's wrist was tall and thin, with arms covered in tattoos that Richard could see even in the dim light. The second man was shorter but built like a boxer, his fists clenched at his sides. The third kept watch, his head turning constantly as he scanned the empty lot. Richard could not hear what they were saying, but he could see Elena shaking her head, her free hand pressed against the wall behind her. The tall man leaned closer, saying something that made Elena's face go pale. She reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out what looked like a small envelope. The tall man took it, opened it, and even from a distance Richard could see his angry reaction. He threw the envelope to the ground and grabbed Elena's other wrist, pulling her away from the wall. Elena stumbled, almost falling, and the sound she made, a small cry of fear, cut through Richard like a blade. Every instinct told Richard to call the police, but something held him back. These men were not random criminals. They knew Elena. This was not a mugging or a simple robbery. This was personal, and Elena was in the middle of it. The shorter man picked up the envelope and showed its contents to his companion. Even from 50 feet away, Richard could see it was not enough money, not enough for whatever Elena owed them. The tall man's gestures became more aggressive, his voice rising although Richard still could not make out the words. Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she spoke rapidly, her hands moving in desperate gestures. She was pleading with them, Richard realized. Begging. The man holding her wrists released them suddenly, causing Elena to stumble backward against the wall. For a moment Richard thought they were going to leave. Then the shorter man stepped forward and placed his hand flat against the wall beside Elena's head, trapping her there while he spoke directly into her face. Whatever he said made Elena's knees buckle. She would have fallen if the wall had not been supporting her. Her face went from pale to gray, and Richard saw her mouth form the word "no" over and over again. The third man, the lookout, suddenly straightened and pointed toward the street. Richard's heart stopped, thinking he had been spotted, but the man was pointing at something else, a police car slowly cruising past the far end of the lot. The three men scattered immediately, disappearing into the maze of alleys and abandoned buildings as quickly as they had appeared. Elena remained pressed against the wall for several long moments, her body shaking so hard that Richard could see it from his hiding spot. When she finally moved, it was to collapse onto her knees beside her car, her hands covering her face as sobs shook her entire body. The envelope lay forgotten on the wet pavement beside her, its contents scattered by the wind. Richard sat frozen in his Mercedes, his mind racing. The Elena he knew, calm, efficient, almost serene in her quiet competence, was gone. In her place was a woman in terror, a woman in debt to dangerous people, a woman whose secret life had just exploded into view. He watched as Elena slowly pulled herself together, wiping her face with the back of her hand and collecting the scattered money from the ground. Her movements were mechanical, like someone in shock. She climbed into her Honda with shaking hands and sat there for several minutes before starting the engine. Richard followed her again, keeping his distance as she drove through the city streets. She did not go home to whatever apartment she lived in. Instead, she drove to City General Hospital and parked in the visitor's lot. Richard watched from across the street as Elena walked through the hospital's front doors, her shoulders squared again, her face composed. But he had seen her break down. He had seen her fear. And he knew that tomorrow morning she would show up at his penthouse at 7 o'clock sharp, ready to work, acting like none of this had ever happened. The question that haunted him as he finally drove home was simple. How long had Elena been living this double life? How long had she been coming to work for him, cleaning his home and preparing his meals, while dealing with threats and danger in her real world? And more importantly, what was he going to do about it? Richard spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling of his bedroom, unable to shake the image of Elena pressed against that brick wall, terror written across her face. The woman who had been part of his daily routine for 2 years, who had made his coffee exactly the way he liked it and had never once been late or unreliable, was in serious trouble. By morning, he had made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Elena Rodriguez arrived at Richard's penthouse at exactly 7 o'clock the next morning, just as she had every working day for the past 2 years. Her face showed no trace of the terror Richard had witnessed the night before. Her uniform was pressed, her hair was neat, and her smile was polite and professional as she greeted him in the hallway. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman," she said, hanging her coat in the closet by the door. "I will have your coffee ready in just a few minutes." Richard studied her face carefully, looking for any sign of what she had endured. There were faint shadows under her eyes that makeup could not quite hide, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the coffee maker, but otherwise she seemed like the same Elena who had worked for him for 2 years. "Elena," he said carefully, "are you feeling all right? You look tired." Her smile never wavered. "I am fine, Mr. Coleman. Thank you for asking." Richard watched as she went through her morning routine with the same efficiency she always showed. She prepared his coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream, exactly as he liked it. She reviewed his schedule for the day, reminding him of his 10 o'clock meeting with investors and his lunch appointment with his business partner. She had already started preparing ingredients for his breakfast when Richard realized he could not pretend he did not know. "Elena, we need to talk." She looked up from the eggs she was cracking into a bowl, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course, Mr. Coleman. What can I help you with?" Richard took a deep breath. "I followed you last night." The egg in Elena's hand cracked completely, spilling its contents onto the counter instead of into the bowl. For just a moment, her careful mask slipped, and Richard saw fear flash across her face before she composed herself again. "I do not understand," she said quietly, reaching for a towel to clean up the spill. "I saw what happened in that parking lot," Richard continued. "I saw those men threatening you. I saw you give them money, and I saw that it was not enough." Elena's hands stilled on the counter. She did not look at him when she spoke. "Mr. Coleman, I think there has been some misunderstanding." "Elena, please." Richard's voice was gentle but firm. "I know what I saw. You were terrified. Those men were threatening you. And then you went to the hospital afterward." The silence stretched between them for a long moment. Elena's shoulders sagged slightly, and Richard realized she was debating whether to continue lying or to trust him with the truth. "My brother," she whispered finally. "They want money for my brother." "Is he sick?" Richard asked. Elena nodded, still not looking at him. "Miguel is 19. He has leukemia. The experimental treatment he needs, it costs more money than I can ever make working normal jobs." The pieces began falling into place in Richard's mind. "So you borrowed money from loan sharks?" "Not at first," Elena said, her voice barely audible. "At first I just worked more jobs. I clean office buildings at night after I leave here. I work at a restaurant on weekends. But it was not enough. Miguel's insurance only covers basic treatment, and the doctors said, they said if he does not get the experimental therapy soon, She could not finish the sentence, but Richard understood. Elena was not just dealing with debt. She was racing against time to save her brother's life. How much do you owe them? He asked. Elena finally looked at him, and Richard saw desperation in her eyes that cut straight through him. $50,000. I borrowed $30,000 6 months ago, but with interest and penalties. She shook her head. They want it all by the end of next week, or they said they will hurt Miguel. Richard felt a surge of anger at the men who had threatened Elena, followed immediately by something else, a fierce protectiveness that surprised him. Why did you not ask for help? I would have. You would have what? Elena interrupted, her voice rising slightly. Given me charity? Felt sorry for the poor housekeeper and her sick brother? That's not. That is exactly what it is, Elena said firmly. Mr. Coleman, you are a good man, but you live in a different world. You cannot understand what it is like to watch someone you love dying while you count every penny, while you work 3 jobs and still cannot save enough money fast enough. Richard wanted to argue, but he realized she was right. He had never faced the choice between pride and desperation. He had never watched someone he loved suffer while feeling powerless to help. Tell me about Miguel, he said instead. Elena's expression softened immediately. He is smart. Smarter than me. He was supposed to start college this year, but then he got sick. He wants to be a teacher. He loves books and mathematics and... Her voice broke slightly. He still tries to make jokes when I visit him, even though I know he is scared. And the experimental treatment could save him? The doctors say it has a 70% success rate. But it has to start soon or it will be too late. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I thought I could handle the loan sharks. I thought I could pay them back quickly. But the interest keeps growing, and now they are threatening violence if you do not pay. Elena nodded. They said if I do not have all the money by next Friday, they will go to the hospital. They will hurt Miguel to send me a message. Richard felt something cold settle in his stomach. The men he had seen the night before had not been making empty threats. They were serious, and Elena was trapped between her brother's life and their demands. Elena, he said carefully, I want to help. No. Her response was immediate and firm. I cannot take your money. Why not? Because I have nothing to give you in return. Because you will see me differently. Because once you pay my debts, I become someone who owes you instead of someone who works for you. Richard understood her pride, but he also understood the stakes. What if it was not charity? What if it was a loan? Elena shook her head. I cannot pay you back $50,000 on a housekeeper's salary. We both know that. Then what if it was an advance on your salary? A very large advance. Mr. Coleman. Richard, he corrected. And I am serious. What if I advanced you enough money to pay off these men and cover Miguel's treatment, and you worked for me until it was paid back? Elena stared at him. That would take years. So, you do not understand. I'm not just talking about my salary here. I'm talking about maybe 10 years of work to pay back that much money. Richard felt something shift inside him as he looked at Elena's face. The idea of her working for him for 10 more years did not feel like a burden. Felt like a gift. Elena, he said quietly, in the 2 years you have worked for me, you have been the most reliable, most trustworthy person in my life. If you are willing to stay for 10 more years, I would consider myself lucky. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of coffee brewing and the distant hum of traffic far below. Elena searched Richard's face, looking for signs of pity or condescension, but finding only sincerity. You would really do that? She asked. You would pay off my debts and trust me to work for you for 10 years to pay it back? Yes, Richard said without hesitation. But only if you let me meet Miguel first. If I am going to be investing in his treatment, I want to meet the young man I am helping to save. For the first time since Richard had known her, Elena smiled, a real smile, not the polite, professional expression she wore during work, but something genuine and warm that transformed her entire face. You want to meet my brother? I want to meet your family, Richard said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. I want to understand what I am fighting for. Elena wiped her eyes again, but this time she was crying from relief instead of fear. Miguel will like you, she said. He will probably try to beat you at chess. I would like that, Richard replied, and realized that he genuinely would. As Elena finished preparing his breakfast, Richard found himself thinking about the evening ahead. For the first time in months, he had plans that did not involve business meetings or social obligations with people who only cared about his money. He was going to meet Elena's family, and somehow, that felt more important than any deal he had ever made. That evening, Richard found himself standing outside City General Hospital with a chess set under his arm and his heart beating faster than it had during his most important business presentations. Elena had given him Miguel's room number and visiting hours, but she had insisted on meeting him there rather than going together. "I need to prepare him," she had explained. "Miguel will be suspicious if my boss suddenly shows up wanting to help. He protects me as much as I protect him." The hospital corridors smelled like disinfectant and floor wax, a sharp contrast to the expensive cologne and fresh flowers that usually surrounded Richard's world. He found room 314 and knocked gently on the door frame. "Come in," called a young voice. Miguel Rodriguez looked nothing like Richard had expected. Despite being sick, the 19-year-old had bright eyes and an alert expression that reminded Richard immediately of Elena. He was thin from the illness and treatments, but his smile was genuine as he looked up from the book he was reading. "You must be Mr. Coleman," Miguel said, setting the book aside. "Elena told me you were coming, but she did not tell me you were bringing reinforcements." He nodded toward the chess set. "She mentioned you might like a game," Richard replied, feeling some of his nervousness ease. "And please call me Richard." "Only if you promise not to let me win because I am sick," Miguel said with a grin that was pure mischief. "Elena always lets me win and it is starting to hurt my feelings." Richard found himself smiling back. "Deal. But I should warn you I am pretty good at chess." "So am I," Miguel replied, reaching for the chess set. "Elena told me you followed her last night." The direct statement caught Richard off guard. He had expected Elena to ease into the subject, not for Miguel to address it immediately. "She did not want to tell me," Miguel continued, setting up the chess pieces with practiced efficiency. "But I could tell something was wrong. Elena is terrible at hiding things from me." He looked up at Richard with eyes that seemed older than his 19 years. "She has been scared for weeks." "She is worried about you," Richard said carefully. "I know. And I know about the men she borrowed money from." Miguel's voice was matter-of-fact, but Richard could see tension in his shoulders. "I told her not to do it. I told her we would find another way." "But there was not another way," Richard said. "No," Miguel admitted quietly. "There was not. The insurance company said the experimental treatment was not medically necessary. They said I should try the standard chemotherapy first and see how it goes." He moved a pawn forward 2 spaces. "The doctors told Elena privately that waiting for standard treatment to fail could cost me my life." Richard moved his own pawn, studying Miguel's face. "So Elena chose to save your life instead of protecting herself." "Elena has been choosing to save my life since our parents died 5 years ago," Miguel said. "She was supposed to go to college. She had a scholarship to study business administration. Instead, she dropped out to take care of me." The information hit Richard like a physical blow. Elena had given up her own education, her own future, to raise her younger brother. And now she was risking her safety to save his life. "She never told me that," Richard said. "Elena does not talk about what she has sacrificed," Miguel replied, moving another piece. "She just does what needs to be done and pretends it was always her choice." They played in comfortable silence for several moves, each man thinking about the woman who connected them. Miguel was indeed good at chess, Richard realized. He was also dying, though he hid it well behind jokes and smiles. "Elena said you offered to help," Miguel said eventually. "I did." "Why?" The question was direct and deserved an honest answer. Richard thought for a moment before responding. "Because Elena works for me and I take care of the people who work for me. Because no one should have to choose between pride and saving someone they love. And because after watching her for 2 years, I know she would do the same for me if our positions were reversed." Miguel studied Richard's face carefully. "You know she will never accept charity." "It would not be charity. It would be a business arrangement." "A business arrangement where you pay $50,000 for Elena to keep doing the same job she already does?" Richard found himself smiling despite the seriousness of the conversation. "You are as direct as your sister." "Someone in this family has to ask the hard questions," Miguel replied, capturing one of Richard's pieces. "Elena is too proud and I am too grateful. So I will ask, what do you really want from us?" The question hung in the air between them. Richard looked at Miguel, thin and sick but fiercely protective of his sister, and realized he did not have a good answer. What did he want? To feel needed? To be a hero? To keep Elena in his life for 10 more years? "I do not know," he admitted finally. "I saw Elena in trouble and I want to fix it. Maybe that makes me a typical rich guy who thinks money solves everything. But the alternative is letting those men hurt you to punish her, and I cannot stand by and watch that happen." Miguel nodded slowly. Elena thinks you will see her differently if you pay her debts. How so? Like she is someone you saved instead of someone who works for you. Like she owes you her life instead of just doing her job. Richard considered this. And what do you think? I think Elena has been taking care of everyone else for so long that she does not know how to let someone take care of her, Miguel said. And I think you have been alone for so long that you do not know the difference between helping someone and trying to buy their loyalty. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Richard moved his queen, trying to buy time to think. So what do you suggest? Be honest with her. Do not pretend this is just business if it is not. Do not pretend you are just being a good employer if you are not. Elena deserves to know what you really want from this arrangement. And what if I do not know what I really want? Miguel smiled. Then be honest about that too. Elena has been lying to herself about a lot of things lately. She could use someone in her life who tells the truth. They finished the game in thoughtful silence. Miguel won, as Elena had predicted he would, but Richard found himself more interested in the conversation than the chess match. When Miguel started showing signs of fatigue, Richard packed up the chess set and prepared to leave. Richard, Miguel called as he reached the door. Thank you for coming. Elena needs more people in her life who see her as more than just someone who takes care of things. And Elena needs to know that you are proud of her, not just grateful, Richard replied. She thinks she has failed you somehow. Miguel's eyes grew sad. She thinks everything that has gone wrong is her fault. Our parents' accident, my illness, the money problems. Elena has never learned to let herself be human. Richard nodded, understanding something about Elena now that he had missed before. I will see you tomorrow? If Elena lets you come back, Miguel said with a tired smile. She is still not sure she trusts your motives. Smart woman, Richard replied. As Richard walked back through the hospital corridors, he thought about Miguel's challenge to be honest about his intentions. The truth was, he had been drawn to Elena long before he followed her that night. He had noticed the way she hummed softly while she worked, the way she always left small touches that made his sterile penthouse feel warmer, the way she anticipated his needs without being asked. The truth was, the idea of Elena working for him for 10 more years felt less like a business arrangement and more like a gift. But Miguel was right, Elena deserved to know that before she agreed to anything. The truth was, Richard had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to care about someone else's happiness more than his own success. Tomorrow he would have to find the courage to tell Elena all of these truths and hope that honesty would be enough to convince her to let him help. Elena was waiting for Richard in his kitchen the next morning, but something was different. Instead of her usual professional greeting, she looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness that made him realize Miguel had told her about their conversation. Miguel said you beat him at chess, she said, pouring Richard's coffee. Actually, he beat me, Richard replied. Quite thoroughly, in fact. He also said you two talked about more than chess. Elena set the coffee cup down and looked at Richard directly. He thinks I should listen to what you have to say. Richard took a sip of his coffee, buying himself a moment to gather his thoughts. After his conversation with Miguel, he had spent most of the night thinking about how to approach Elena with honesty instead of just good intentions. Elena, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. She nodded, her expression guarded. I have been thinking about what Miguel said about being honest with you about my motives. The truth is, my offer to help is not entirely about being a good employer. Richard set down his coffee cup and met Elena's eyes. The truth is, I have been alone for a very long time. I have money and success, but I do not have people in my life who matter to me. You matter to me, Elena. Not just as an employee but as a person. Elena's expression softened slightly, but she did not speak. I want to help you because I care about what happens to you and Miguel. I want to help because watching you go through this alone makes me feel helpless in a way I am not used to feeling. And yes, I want to help because the idea of having you in my life for 10 more years does not feel like a burden, it feels like something I would be grateful for. Richard took a deep breath before continuing. But I also want to help because it is the right thing to do, and because I believe you would do the same for me if our positions were reversed. So my motives are not purely selfless, but they are not purely selfish either. They are just human. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing what Richard had said. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. Miguel likes you, she said. He does not like many people quickly, but he likes you. I like him too. He is smart and brave and he loves you very much. He is scared, Elena said quietly. He tries to hide it, but I know he is scared. The doctors said if the treatment does not work. She could not finish the sentence. Then we make sure it works, Richard said firmly. Elena, I want to pay off your debts and cover Miguel's treatment costs. Not as a loan, not as an advance on your salary, but as a gift. Richard, I cannot. Let me finish, he said gently. I want to do this as a gift because you have already given me more than you know. For 2 years you have made my house feel like a home. You have taken care of me in ways that have nothing to do with your job description. You have been kind and patient and reliable in a world where those qualities are rare. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she did not interrupt. I do not want you to work for me for 10 years to pay back a debt, Richard continued. I want you to choose to stay because you want to be here. And if someday you decide you want to do something else with your life, I want you to feel free to go. And what do you want in return? Elena asked. I want you to let me meet your family. I want you to trust me enough to tell me when you are struggling instead of hiding it. I want to be the kind of person who deserves your friendship. Richard paused. And I want to know that if Miguel gets better and decides to go to college, you will think about going back to school too. Elena stared at him in surprise. Miguel told you about my scholarship? He told me you gave up college to take care of him. He thinks you should have the chance to finish what you started. Elena sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, her professional composure finally cracking. I cannot just take $50,000 from you, Richard. It is too much. Elena, I made more than $50,000 yesterday from investments I barely pay attention to. That money means nothing to me sitting in a bank account, but it means Miguel's life to you. It would change everything between us, Elena said. You would not just be my employer anymore, and I would not just be your housekeeper. Would that be so terrible? Richard asked. Elena looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. I do not know. I have worked for you for 2 years, but I do not really know you. I know you like your coffee with 2 sugars and cream. I know you work too late and do not eat enough vegetables. I know you are polite to me and generous at Christmas. But I do not know what kind of man you are when no one is watching. Richard nodded. Then let me show you. Come to dinner with me tonight. Not at some expensive restaurant where I am trying to impress you, but somewhere we can actually talk. Let me tell you about my life, and you can decide if I am the kind of person you want to trust with your family's future. Elena hesitated. That sounds like a date. Maybe it is, Richard said honestly. Maybe I have been wanting to ask you to dinner for months and just used this crisis as an excuse. Or maybe I just want us to know each other as people instead of employer and employee. Either way, you deserve to know who I really am before you let me help you. Elena was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with the decision. Finally, she looked up at Richard with a small smile. There is a small Italian restaurant near the hospital, she said. It is not fancy, but they know me there. If we are going to have dinner, I want it to be somewhere I feel comfortable. Richard felt a surge of warmth that surprised him. That sounds perfect. And Richard? If we do this, if you help Miguel and we become whatever we are becoming, I need to know that you see me as an equal. Not as someone you rescued, not as someone who owes you, but as someone who chose to trust you. Elena, Richard said seriously, you are the strongest person I know. You have been taking care of everyone else while dealing with threats and fear and impossible choices. If anything, I am the one who should be grateful that you are willing to let me be part of your life. Elena smiled then, the first truly relaxed smile Richard had seen from her since he had started working for him. Miguel is going to want to hear all about this dinner, she said. He has been trying to convince me to date someone for years. Smart kid, Richard replied and was rewarded with Elena's laughter. As Elena returned to her work, Richard found himself looking forward to the evening ahead with anticipation he had not felt in years. For the first time since his divorce 5 years earlier, he was interested in getting to know someone not for what they could do for his business or his social status, but simply for who they were. Tonight, Richard and Elena would have their first real conversation. And maybe, if he was very lucky, it would be the first of many. The restaurant Elena chose was called Rosa's, a small family-owned place with red checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and basil filling the air. It was nothing like the upscale establishments Richard usually frequented, and he immediately understood why Elena felt comfortable there. Elena. The elderly woman behind the counter rushed over as soon as they walked in. How is Miguel today? Better, Mrs. Rosa. The new treatment is starting next week. Elena hugged the woman warmly. This is Richard. Richard, this is Mrs. Rosa. She has been feeding me dinner after hospital visits for months. Mrs. Rosa looked Richard up and down with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen many people in her 70 years. You are the one helping with Miguel's treatment. Richard was surprised Elena had mentioned him, but he nodded. I am trying to help. Mrs. Rosa studied him for another moment, then smiled and patted his cheek. Elena needs someone who sees how special she is. Come, I will give you the best table. They were seated in a corner booth with a view of the small kitchen, where Richard could watch Mrs. Rosa's son preparing pasta with the kind of care that came from years of practice. Elena seemed more relaxed than he had ever seen her, laughing at Mrs. Rosa's stories about the regular customers and translating some of the Italian phrases the older woman mixed into her English. She reminds me of my grandmother, Elena explained after Mrs. Rosa had brought them wine and disappeared back into the kitchen. My grandmother used to say that you could tell everything about a person by watching how they treated food, whether they rushed through meals or took time to enjoy them, whether they cooked with love or just to fill their stomach. What would your grandmother have thought about me? Richard asked. Elena considered the question seriously. She would have said you eat too many meals alone. She believed eating was supposed to bring people together. She would have been right, Richard admitted. Most of my meals are business dinners or eating at my desk while I work. What about when you were married? Elena asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. I am sorry, that is too personal. No, it is fine, Richard said. My ex-wife and I rarely ate together either. We were both too busy with our careers to make time for things like family dinners. Looking back, I think that should have been a warning sign. Elena sipped her wine thoughtfully. Miguel and I always eat dinner together when I get home from work, even if it is late. It is the only time of day when we really talk. What do you talk about? Everything. Books he is reading, dreams he has for when he gets better, memories of our parents. Sometimes he helps me figure out problems I am having. Elena smiled. Actually, he was the one who convinced me tonight was a good idea. Really? He said I spend so much time taking care of other people that I never let anyone take care of me. He said maybe it was time to try something different. Mrs. Rosa appeared with plates of pasta that smelled incredible. As they ate, Richard found himself telling Elena things he had not talked about in years: his childhood in a small town, his parents who had died in a car accident when he was in college, the loneliness that had driven him to work 18-hour days building his company. Is that why you never had children? Elena asked gently. Because you were too busy working? Partly, Richard said. But also because I was never sure I would be a good father. My own father was always working, always chasing the next business deal. I was afraid I would repeat that pattern. But you are good with Miguel, Elena pointed out. He told me you actually listened to him, not just pretended to listen while thinking about other things. Miguel is easy to listen to. He is smart and funny, and he has this way of cutting through nonsense to get to what really matters. Elena's face lit up with pride. He has always been like that. Even when he was little, he could see things that adults missed. Our parents used to joke that Miguel was born wise. Tell me about them, Richard said. Your parents. Elena's expression grew soft and sad. They were good people. My father worked construction and my mother cleaned houses. They never had much money, but they made sure Miguel and I knew we were loved. They were so proud when I got the scholarship to college. They said I was going to be the first person in our family to get a degree. And you still could be, Richard said. After Miguel is better, you could go back to school. I am 27 years old, Richard. Most people finish college when they are 22. So what? You would be 29 or 30 when you graduated. You would still have 40 years of career ahead of you. Elena looked at him with surprise. You really think I should go back to school? I think you should do whatever makes you happy. But yes, I think you are smart enough and strong enough to do anything you set your mind to. They talked until the restaurant began emptying out around them, sharing stories and learning about each other in a way that felt both natural and thrilling. Richard discovered that Elena loved mystery novels and old movies, that she had taught herself to speak 3 languages by watching television, and that she dreamed of someday traveling to see the places she had only read about in books. Elena learned that Richard had built his first computer when he was 12, that he still missed the small town where he grew up, and that despite his success, he often felt like he was pretending to be someone he was not. What do you mean? Elena asked. I mean, I wear expensive suits and attend fancy parties and make small talk with people who only care about my money. But sometimes I look around and think, what am I doing here? This is not the life I imagined when I was young. What kind of life did you imagine? Richard thought for a moment. Something more connected, I guess. More real. I wanted to build things that mattered, to have relationships that were about more than what I could do for other people or what they could do for me. Is that what you think this is? Elena asked quietly. A relationship that is about more than what we can do for each other? Richard met her eyes across the table. I hope so. I know I started by wanting to help you, but spending time with you and Miguel, it has reminded me what it feels like to care about people just because of who they are, not because of what they can give me. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. I am scared, she admitted finally. Of what? Of letting myself care about you too much. Of letting Miguel get attached to you and then having you disappear when you get bored or find someone more interesting. Of accepting your help and then finding out there are strings attached that you have not told me about yet. Richard reached across the table and gently took Elena's hand. Elena, I cannot promise I will never hurt you or disappoint you. I am not perfect and I have made mistakes in relationships before. But I can promise that I will never lie to you, and I will never use your situation against you. If you let me help Miguel, it is because I want to help, not because I expect anything in return. Elena looked down at their joined hands. And what about us? What happens between us after Miguel is better? I do not know, Richard said honestly. I know I want to find out. I know I want to keep having dinners like this and conversations like this. I know I want to be part of your life in whatever way you will let me. But Elena, you do not owe me a relationship because I help your brother. If you decide you want to be with me, it has to be because you want to be with me, not because you feel obligated. Elena lifted her eyes to meet his. And if I decide I do not want to be with you? Then I will be disappointed, but I will still be glad I got to know you and Miguel. And I will still want to help him get better because that is what you do for people you care about. Elena squeezed Richard's hand gently. Miguel was right about you. What did he say? He said you were lonely but not bitter, successful but not arrogant. He said you looked at me like I was a person, not just someone who worked for you. Elena smiled. He also said you let him win at chess even though you pretended not to. Richard laughed. Your brother is very observant. He gets that from our mother. She could always tell what people were really thinking. Elena's expression grew serious again. Richard, if we do this, if you help Miguel and we see where this goes between us, I need you to understand something. What? Miguel and I are a package deal. He is not just my little brother. He is my family, my responsibility, my priority. If you are going to be part of my life, you have to be okay with that. Elena, Richard said firmly, Miguel is not an obstacle to overcome. He is part of what makes you who you are. The way you love him, the way you have sacrificed for him, the way you have never given up on him, those are some of the things I admire most about you. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. You really mean that? I really mean that. Mrs. Rosa appeared at their table with a knowing smile. You two need dessert. I have cannoli that will make you fall in love. Elena laughed. I think we might already be there, Mrs. Rosa. Richard felt his heart skip at Elena's words. As Mrs. Rosa brought them dessert and more stories about her own romance with her late husband, Richard realized that for the first time in years, he was exactly where he wanted to be. Sitting in a small restaurant, holding hands with a woman who had just admitted she might be falling in love with him, talking about family and dreams and the future. This was the real life he had been searching for without knowing it. 3 weeks later, Miguel's experimental treatment was showing promising results. His energy levels were improving, his blood work was getting better, and most importantly, he was smiling more often. Elena had moved through those weeks like someone learning to breathe again, the constant fear that had shadowed her for months finally beginning to lift. Richard had kept his promise to pay off her debts, handling the loan sharks through his lawyer so Elena never had to see them again. He had also kept his promise to let their relationship develop naturally, never pressuring Elena or making her feel obligated to spend time with him beyond their daily work routine. But they had been spending time together. Dinners at Rosa's had become a weekly tradition. Richard had started joining Elena for her evening visits to Miguel, bringing books and puzzles and engaging in lengthy debates about everything from politics to philosophy. Elena had begun staying a few minutes longer each morning to share coffee and conversation before starting her work. Tonight was different though. Miguel had been released from the hospital for a 3-day break between treatment cycles, and Elena had invited Richard to have dinner at her apartment for the first time. Richard stood outside the small building in Elena's neighborhood, holding a bag of groceries and feeling more nervous than he had for any business presentation. This was Elena's world, her private space, and he wanted desperately to fit into it. Elena's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building that had seen better days but was clean and well maintained. When she opened the door, Richard saw immediately why she had been hesitant to invite him over. The apartment was tiny: 1 bedroom, a small living room, and a kitchen that was barely large enough for 2 people. But it was warm and welcoming in a way his penthouse had never been. Books were stacked on every available surface, photographs of Elena and Miguel covered the walls, and the smell of something delicious cooking filled the air. Welcome to our home, Elena said, taking the groceries from Richard. It is not much, but it is ours. It is perfect, Richard said and meant it. It feels like a real home. Miguel emerged from the bedroom, looking healthier than Richard had seen him since they met. His color was better, and he had gained a few pounds that made his face less gaunt. Richard, Elena has been cooking all day. I told her you probably eat at restaurants that cost more than our rent, but she wanted to make something special. Miguel grinned at his sister's embarrassed expression. She made her grandmother's recipe for chicken with rice. It is the only thing she cooks that I actually ask for seconds of. Miguel? Elena protested, but she was smiling. The evening was relaxed and comfortable in a way Richard had never experienced. They ate at Elena's small kitchen table, elbow to elbow, passing dishes and talking over each other like a real family. Miguel entertained them with stories from his hospital stay, imitating the various nurses and doctors with an accuracy that had Elena laughing until tears ran down her face. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where Miguel challenged Richard to another chess game while Elena cleaned up despite Richard's offers to help. She will not let you, Miguel said, setting up the chessboard. Elena needs to take care of people. It is how she shows love. And how do you show love? Richard asked. I try to get better so she can stop worrying about me, Miguel said simply. And I try to make her laugh when she is sad. They played chess while Elena put away dishes in the kitchen, their conversation quieter and more serious than usual. Elena told me you paid off the loan sharks, Miguel said, moving a piece. I did. She also told me you did not make her sign any contracts or agreements. I did not. Miguel looked up from the board. Why not? In business, do you not always protect your investments? Richard considered the question carefully. This was not a business investment, Miguel. This was personal. Personal how? I care about your sister. I care about you. When you care about people, you help them because you want to, not because you expect something back. Miguel nodded slowly. Elena has never had anyone care about her like that. Our parents did, but they died when she was so young. Since then, she has been the one taking care of everyone else. She told me you take care of her too. I try. But I have been sick for a long time, and Elena has been strong for a long time. She needs someone who can be strong for her sometimes. Is that what you think I am doing? Miguel smiled. I think you are falling in love with my sister, and she is falling in love with you, and both of you are too scared to admit it. Richard felt heat rise in his cheeks. What makes you say that? The way you look at her when she is not watching. The way she hums while she gets ready to see you. The way both of you light up when you are in the same room. Miguel moved his queen. Also, Elena bought a new dress for tonight. She has not bought herself anything new in 2 years, but she wanted to look nice for you. Richard glanced toward the kitchen, where Elena was indeed wearing a soft blue dress he had never seen before. It was simple and inexpensive, but it brought out the color of her eyes and made her look beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with money or fashion. Your move, Miguel said quietly. Richard made his move, but his attention was divided between the game and watching Elena move around her small kitchen. She had taken her hair down from its usual neat bun, and it fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She was humming under her breath, the same melody he sometimes heard her humming while she worked in his penthouse. She is beautiful, Richard said without thinking. Yes, she is, Miguel agreed. But that is not why you care about her. No, Richard admitted. I care about her because she is kind and strong and loyal. Because she makes sacrifices without complaining. Because she sees the best in people even when they do not deserve it. Because she makes you want to be a better man? Richard looked at Miguel in surprise. How did you know? Because that is what good women do, Miguel said with wisdom beyond his 19 years. Our mother did that for our father. Elena does that for me. And now she is doing that for you. They finished the game in comfortable silence, with Miguel winning again but by a smaller margin than usual. When Elena joined them in the living room, she settled onto the couch next to Richard, close enough that he could smell her shampoo and feel the warmth of her body. Did Miguel beat you again? She asked. Barely, Richard replied. I think I am getting better. Or I am getting distracted, Miguel said with a meaningful look at his sister. I think I am going to go to bed early. The treatment makes me tired. Elena looked concerned immediately. Are you feeling all right? Do you need anything? I am fine, Elena. Just tired. Miguel stood and hugged his sister goodnight, then shook Richard's hand. Thank you for dinner and the game. It was nice having family dinner. The word family hung in the air after Miguel disappeared into the bedroom. Elena and Richard sat on the couch, suddenly alone together in the intimate space of Elena's home for the first time. He likes you, Elena said softly. I like him too. He is a remarkable young man. He is getting better because of you, Elena said, turning to face Richard. The doctors say the treatment is working. Miguel is going to live because you helped us. Miguel is going to live because he is strong and because he has a sister who never gave up on him, Richard corrected. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I was so scared, Richard. For months I was so scared that I was going to lose him. I do not know how to thank you for giving us hope. You do not need to thank me, Richard said, reaching out to touch Elena's face gently. You just need to let yourself be happy. Elena leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I'm happy. For the first time in so long I am happy. Elena, Richard said softly. She opened her eyes and looked at him, and Richard saw something there that made his heart race. It was not gratitude or obligation. It was affection and desire and something deeper that he was afraid to name. Yes. I am going to kiss you now if that is okay. Elena smiled, the first completely carefree smile Richard had ever seen from her. I was hoping you would. Richard leaned forward and kissed Elena gently, tentatively, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest as she moved closer to him on the couch. The kiss was soft and sweet and perfect, full of all the emotions they had been carefully dancing around for weeks. When they finally broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against Richard's, both of them breathing heavily. I have wanted to do that for a long time, Richard admitted. So have I, Elena whispered back. They sat together on the couch for another hour, talking quietly and sharing gentle kisses, both of them aware that something important had shifted between them. When Richard finally left, he walked home through the city streets feeling lighter than he had in years. For the first time since his divorce, Richard was in love. And for the first time in her adult life, Elena was allowing herself to be loved in return. 2 months later, Richard was hosting his annual company party at an upscale hotel downtown. It was the kind of event Elena had helped him prepare for in the past, ordering flowers and coordinating with caterers, but always from behind the scenes. Tonight was different. Tonight, Richard had asked Elena to attend as his guest. Elena stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the black dress Richard had insisted on buying for her after she protested that she had nothing appropriate to wear to such a fancy event. The dress was beautiful and fit perfectly, but Elena felt like she was wearing a costume. You look gorgeous, Miguel said from the doorway. He was home permanently now, his treatment complete and successful. The doctors had declared him in full remission just the week before. I look like I am pretending to be someone I am not, Elena replied, smoothing the dress nervously. You look like a woman going to a party with the man she loves, Miguel corrected. There is nothing wrong with that. Elena turned to face her brother. Miguel, what if I do not fit in with his world? What if his friends and business partners think he is crazy for dating his housekeeper? Then they are not very good friends, Miguel said simply. Besides, you are not just his housekeeper anymore. You have not cleaned his house or cooked his meals in weeks. This was true. As Elena and Richard's relationship had developed, her role in his life had naturally evolved. She still came to his penthouse every day, but now they spent their time having breakfast together, discussing Richard's business decisions and planning their evenings. Richard had hired a cleaning service to handle the housework and had been learning to cook simple meals for himself. I am scared, Elena admitted. Of what? Of embarrassing him. Of saying the wrong thing or using the wrong fork or not understanding some reference that everyone else gets. Elena sat down on her bed, careful not to wrinkle the dress. Richard's world is so different from ours, Miguel. Sometimes I wonder if we are just fooling ourselves thinking this can work. Miguel sat down beside his sister. Elena, do you love Richard? Yes. Does he love you? He says he does. Do you believe him? Elena thought about the way Richard looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, the way he remembered small details about her life, the way he had seamlessly included Miguel in all their plans without ever making it seem like an obligation. Yes, I believe him. Then stop worrying about what other people think, Miguel said firmly. Richard chose you, Elena. Not because you are his housekeeper or because you needed his help, but because of who you are. Trust him to know his own mind. Elena hugged her brother tightly. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, Miguel replied, hugging her back. The hotel ballroom was exactly as elegant and intimidating as Elena had expected. Crystal chandeliers cast sparkling light over tables draped in white linen, and waiters in black tie moved smoothly through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and appetizers Elena could not identify. Richard appeared at her side immediately, looking handsome in his black tuxedo and beaming with pride as he offered her his arm. "You look absolutely beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek. "I feel like I am going to trip over this dress," Elena admitted. "You look perfect. Come on, I want to introduce you to some people." The first hour went better than Elena had expected. Richard's employees were polite and friendly, and several of them already knew who she was from Richard's frequent mentions of her and Miguel. She found herself relaxing as she realized that many of these people were just working professionals like herself, not the intimidating elite she had imagined. The trouble started when Richard's business partner, James Harrison, approached them with his wife Patricia. "Richard." James clapped Richard on the back with the forced enthusiasm of someone who had been drinking. "I see you have brought your friend tonight." Something in James's tone made Elena's stomach tighten, but Richard either did not notice or chose to ignore it. "James, Patricia, I would like you to meet Elena Rodriguez." "Elena, these are my business partners, James and Patricia Harrison." Patricia looked Elena up and down with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to judging people by their appearance and finding them wanting. "How nice," Patricia said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "And how did you two meet?" "Elena has been working for me for the past 2 years, Richard said proudly. "She is the most capable person I know." Elena felt her cheeks burn as she realized Richard's innocent comment had just confirmed what Patricia was obviously thinking. James and Patricia exchanged a look that Elena recognized immediately, the look of people sharing a private joke at someone else's expense. "How interesting," James said. "Richard, you always were one to find value in unexpected places." "Elena is not an unexpected place," Richard said, his tone sharpening slightly. "She is an exceptional woman." "Of course," Patricia said smoothly. "I am sure she is very skilled at what she does." Elena felt like she was going to be sick. The implication in Patricia's tone was clear, and from the way other people nearby had started glancing in their direction, Elena realized their conversation was attracting attention. "Excuse me," Elena said quietly. "I need to use the restroom." She escaped before Richard could follow her, making her way quickly through the crowded ballroom to the ladies' room in the hotel lobby. Once inside, she locked herself in a stall and tried to breathe normally. She could hear voices from other women who had followed her into the restroom, their conversation carrying clearly in the tiled space. "Did you see Richard Coleman's date?" one voice said. "I heard she is his housekeeper." "You are kidding," another voice replied. "Richard is dating the help?" "That is what Patricia Harrison told me. Apparently, she has been cleaning his house and now she is cleaning out his bank account, if you know what I mean." "Poor Richard. He has always been too trusting." "I suppose she is pretty enough, in that exotic way some men find appealing." "It will not last," the first voice said confidently. "Men like Richard always come back to their own kind eventually. She is probably just a phase he is going through." Elena sat frozen in the stall, listening to these women discuss her like she was not even human. The worst part was that their words echoed her own fears, the doubts she had been trying to push aside for weeks. When the voices finally faded and Elena was sure she was alone, she emerged from the stall and looked at herself in the mirror. The beautiful dress Richard had bought her suddenly felt like a costume again, and she could see what these people saw: a woman pretending to belong in a world that would never truly accept her. Elena returned to the ballroom determined to get through the rest of the evening with dignity intact. Richard was waiting for her, concern written across his face. "Are you all right? You were gone for a while." "I am fine," Elena said, forcing a smile. "Just needed a moment." Richard studied her face carefully. "Elena, if James and Patricia said something to upset you—" "They did not say anything that was not true," Elena interrupted. "I am your housekeeper, Richard. That is how we met, and that is what people are going to see when they look at us." "Elena." "I think I should go home," Elena said quietly. "I have a headache." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Elena's expression stopped him. "Let me drive you." "No, stay and enjoy your party. I will take a taxi." "Elena, please. Let me come with you. We can talk about whatever is bothering you." Elena looked around the ballroom at all the elegant people in their expensive clothes, people who belonged in Richard's world in a way she never would. "Richard, I need some time to think. Can you give me that?" Richard's face fell, but he nodded. "Of course. But Elena, please do not let whatever happened tonight change how you feel about us. Please." Elena kissed Richard's cheek gently. "I love you, Richard. That is not going to change. But love is not always enough, is it?" She left before Richard could respond, walking out of the hotel into the cool night air and hailing a taxi home. As the city lights blurred past the window, Elena wondered if she had been naive to think that love could bridge the gap between their different worlds. Some barriers she was beginning to realize might be too high to climb. Elena did not answer Richard's calls for 3 days. She went to work at the office building she cleaned at night, she visited Miguel for their daily chess games, and she ignored the flowers Richard sent to her apartment along with handwritten notes asking her to please talk to him. On the 4th day, Richard was waiting outside her apartment building when she came home from work. "Elena, please," he said as she approached the front door. "I need to talk to you." Elena looked at Richard, standing there in his expensive suit looking lost and desperate, and felt her heart break a little more. "Richard, you should not be here. Where else should I be? The woman I love has been avoiding me for 3 days, and I do not know what I did wrong." "You did not do anything wrong," Elena said, pulling out her keys. "That is the problem. I do not understand." Elena unlocked the front door and hesitated. Every instinct told her to invite Richard upstairs, to talk through what had happened at the party, to find a way to make their relationship work. Despite the obstacles. But the voices from the ladies' room still echoed in her head, along with Patricia Harrison's meaningful looks and James's condescending tone. "Elena, please," Richard said again. "Just give me a chance to understand what happened." Against her better judgment, Elena led Richard upstairs to her apartment. Miguel was studying at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around him as he worked on applications for spring semester enrollment at the local community college. He looked up when they entered, taking in Elena's tense expression and Richard's obvious distress. "I will go to my room," Miguel said, starting to gather his books. "No," Elena said. "Stay. You should hear this too." Richard looked confused, but he sat down at the kitchen table across from Elena while Miguel remained in his chair between them. "Richard," Elena began, "what did people say to you after I left the party?" Richard's face darkened. "Nothing worth repeating. Tell me anyway." Richard was quiet for a moment, clearly reluctant to share what he had heard. "James made some comments about gold diggers and fortune hunters. Patricia suggested that you were using your position in my household to take advantage of me. A few other people asked if I was sure I knew what I was doing." Elena nodded, unsurprised. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them they were wrong about you. I told them you were the most honest, hard-working person I had ever met. I told James that if he ever spoke about you like that again, he could find himself a new business partner." Miguel looked impressed, but Elena just felt tired. "Richard, do you not see the problem?" "The problem is that some people are small-minded and judgmental," Richard said firmly. "That is their problem, not ours." "No, Richard. The problem is that you are always going to have to defend me. Every party, every business dinner, every social event you are going to have to convince people that I am worthy of your attention. And I am always going to be the housekeeper who got lucky, no matter what else I accomplish in my life." Richard reached across the table and took Elena's hands. "Elena, I do not care what anyone else thinks. I care about what you think, what Miguel thinks, what I think. Why should their opinions matter more than ours?" "Because they are your world," Elena said sadly. "Those people at the party, they are your business partners, your social circle, your community. If you stay with me, you will be choosing me over all of them." "Then I choose you," Richard said without hesitation. "Elena, I choose you every day. I choose you over business deals that require me to socialize with people I do not respect. I choose you over social events that make you feel unwelcome. I choose you over anyone who cannot see how incredible you are." Miguel had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. "Elena, can I say something?" Elena nodded. "You taught me that when people treat you badly, it says more about them than it says about you," Miguel said. "You taught me that my worth is not determined by other people's opinions. Why are you not following your own advice?" Elena looked at her brother, seeing the same wisdom in his eyes that had guided her through their parents' death and his illness. "Because this is different, Miguel." "How?" "Because..." Elena struggled to find the words. "Because when people looked down on us before, we had each other and we did not need anything from them. But Richard's world is different. His business success depends on relationships with people like James and Patricia. His social life revolves around events like that party. If he chooses me, he might lose all of that. So," Miguel said simply, "what good is success if it requires you to surround yourself with people who have no compassion? What good is a social life built on excluding people who are different from you?" Richard squeezed Elena's hands gently. "Miguel is right, Elena. I have been successful and lonely for years. I have had money and status and business connections, but I have not had love or family or real friendship. What you and Miguel have given me is worth more than all of that. Elena looked at Richard's face, seeing the sincerity there, but still feeling the weight of doubt. Richard, what happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when you realize that dating me means giving up the kind of life you used to have? Elena, Richard said seriously, I have been living that life for 15 years and it never made me happy. The only time I have been truly happy in all those years is the time I have spent with you and Miguel. Why would I want to go back to being miserable just to please people I do not even like? Miguel stood up from the table. I am going to make coffee, he announced. And while I do that, you two are going to figure out whether you trust each other enough to build a life together despite what other people think. As Miguel moved around the small kitchen, Elena studied Richard's face. She could see the love there, the determination, the willingness to fight for their relationship. But she could also see something else, a naivety about what their different backgrounds would mean in the long term. Richard, she said quietly, I need you to be honest with me about something. Anything. Are you in love with me or are you in love with the idea of saving me? The question hung in the air between them. Richard was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking carefully about his answer. I wondered about that too, he admitted finally. Especially at the beginning, I wondered if I was just trying to be a hero or trying to fix something to make myself feel better about my own loneliness. Elena felt her heart sink, but Richard continued. But then I realized something. Heroes want to save people and then move on to the next rescue. I do not want to move on from you, Elena. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to argue with you about what movie to watch and help Miguel with his college applications and meet your extended family and have you meet mine. Richard paused, his voice growing stronger. I want to build a life with you, not save you from your old life. There is a difference. Elena felt tears starting to fall, but for the first time in days, they were not tears of sadness or fear. And Elena, Richard continued, I need you to be honest with me about something too. What? Are you pulling away because you are genuinely worried about our different backgrounds, or are you pulling away because you are scared of being happy? The question hit Elena like a physical blow, because she recognized the truth in it immediately. For years she had been so focused on surviving, on taking care of Miguel, on getting through each day, that she had forgotten how to hope for happiness. The idea of actually having everything she wanted, Miguel healthy, a man who loved her, a future full of possibilities, was almost too overwhelming to accept. Both, she whispered. I am scared of both. Richard stood up and moved around the table to kneel beside Elena's chair. Elena, look at me. She lifted her eyes to meet his, seeing nothing but love and patience there. I cannot promise you that loving me will be easy, Richard said. I cannot promise that we will not face more judgment or more challenges. But I can promise you that I will never stop fighting for us. I can promise you that every single day, I will choose you over anyone who does not respect what we have. Miguel appeared with 3 cups of coffee, setting them on the table with a satisfied smile. Good. You both look less miserable than when I started making coffee. Elena laughed despite her tears. Miguel, what would I do without you? Hopefully you will never have to find out, Miguel replied. But Elena, I want you to think about something. What? For 5 years, you have put your life on hold to take care of me. You gave up college, you gave up dating, you gave up having your own dreams because you were so focused on making sure I survived. Miguel sat back down and looked at his sister seriously. I survived, Elena. I am healthy and I am going to college and I am going to be fine. Do not waste the rest of your life being afraid to be happy just because you have been unhappy for so long. Elena looked between Miguel and Richard, seeing the same love and determination in both their faces. 2 men who wanted nothing more than for her to believe she deserved happiness. Richard, she said slowly, if we do this, if we really try to build a life together, there are going to be people who never accept me in your world. Then we will build our own world, Richard replied. With people who do accept you, people who see what I see when I look at you. And what do you see? Richard smiled. I see a woman who sacrificed everything for her family without complaint. I see someone who works 3 jobs and never loses her kindness or her dignity. I see someone who taught her teenage brother to be wise and compassionate despite facing loss and hardship. I see someone who makes me want to be better than I have ever been. Elena felt the last of her resistance crumbling. I love you, Richard. I love you so much it scares me. I love you too, Richard said, cupping her face in his hands. And Elena, being scared is okay. We can be scared together. Miguel cleared his throat. So does this mean you two are done being dramatic and can go back to being sickeningly happy? Because I have homework to finish, and I cannot concentrate when you are both miserable. Elena laughed and pulled Miguel into a hug. Yes, we are done being dramatic. Richard, you are staying for dinner? Elena bought groceries earlier, which means she was planning to cook whether she admitted it or not. Richard looked at Elena questioningly, and she nodded with a small smile. Miguel is right. I bought groceries because I was hoping we could work this out. As Elena started preparing dinner and Richard helped Miguel with his college applications, Elena realized that this was what she wanted, not the fancy parties or the expensive dresses, but quiet evenings with the people she loved, building a life based on understanding and support rather than appearances and expectations. There would still be challenges ahead, still people who would judge their relationship and question their choices. But as Elena watched Richard patiently explaining financial aid forms to Miguel while making terrible jokes that had her brother laughing, she knew that whatever they faced, they would face it together. Love might not conquer all, but it could conquer enough. 6 months later, Miguel walked across the stage at his community college graduation ceremony, healthy and strong and grinning from ear to ear. Elena sat in the audience between Richard and Mrs. Rosa, crying happy tears as she watched her brother accept his associate degree in education. The journey to this moment had not been easy. Miguel had faced setbacks during his treatment, moments when his progress stalled and everyone feared the worst. But he had persevered with the same quiet determination that Elena recognized from their father, and now he was not only healthy but thriving. I am so proud of him, Elena whispered to Richard as Miguel posed for pictures with his classmates. You should be proud of yourself too, Richard replied, squeezing her hand. None of this would have been possible without everything you sacrificed for him. Elena leaned against Richard's shoulder, feeling a contentment she had never imagined possible. The past 6 months had brought changes she was still adjusting to. Richard had convinced her to enroll in evening classes at the same community college where Miguel was finishing his degree. She was studying business administration, picking up where she had left off 8 years earlier when their parents died. The transition had been challenging. Elena had not been in a classroom in years, and she often felt older and out of place among her younger classmates. But Richard had been endlessly patient, helping her with assignments and encouraging her through moments of self-doubt. Miguel had been equally supportive, studying with her in the evenings and celebrating every good grade like it was a personal victory. Richard had also made changes in his own life. After the confrontation with James Harrison at the company party, their business partnership had become increasingly strained. James had never apologized for his comments about Elena, and Richard had found it impossible to maintain a working relationship with someone who showed such disrespect for the woman he loved. 3 months earlier, Richard had bought out James's share of the company and restructured the business to reflect his own values. He hired more women and minorities in leadership positions, implemented family-friendly policies that allowed employees to prioritize their personal lives, and shifted the company culture away from the ruthless competitiveness that had previously defined it. The changes had been financially risky, but they had also been personally rewarding. Richard found himself enjoying work again, surrounded by people who shared his commitment to building something meaningful rather than just profitable. Richard Coleman. Miguel called out, jogging over to where they were standing. Did you see that? I actually graduated. We saw, Richard replied, pulling Miguel into a hug. Congratulations, college graduate. How does it feel? Weird, Miguel admitted with a laugh. 3 years ago I thought I was going to die. Now I am planning to transfer to the state university next year to finish my bachelor's degree in education. Elena hugged her brother tightly, remembering all the nights she had lain awake terrified that she would lose him. I am so proud of you, Miguel. Mom and Dad would be so proud. They would be proud of both of us, Miguel corrected. Elena, you are graduating next spring and then you are going to use that business degree to do something amazing. Elena was still getting used to thinking about her own future in terms of possibilities rather than just responsibilities. For so long, her dreams had been limited to keeping Miguel alive and keeping them both housed and fed. Now, with Miguel healthy and her own education progressing, she was beginning to imagine what she might want to do with her life beyond survival. Actually, Richard said, I have been thinking about something I wanted to discuss with both of you. Elena and Miguel looked at him curiously. I have been thinking about starting a foundation, Richard continued. Something focused on helping families who are facing medical crises they cannot afford. I would want Elena to help me run it, once she finishes her degree. Elena stared at Richard in surprise. You want me to help you run a foundation? I want you to help me run our foundation, Richard corrected. Elena, you understand what it is like to face impossible choices between money and family. You know what kinds of support people need, and you know how to provide it with dignity instead of pity. You would be perfect for this. Miguel grinned. Elena, you could help other families avoid what we went through. Elena felt tears starting again, but these were tears of possibility and hope. Richard, are you serious? Completely serious. Elena, you have already changed my life in ways I never expected. Let me help you change other people's lives too. That evening they celebrated Miguel's graduation at Rosa's restaurant, where Mrs. Rosa had prepared a feast and invited what felt like half the neighborhood to join them. Elena looked around the crowded restaurant, watching Richard chat easily with Miguel's friends from college, seeing Mrs. Rosa's son teaching Richard how to make proper Italian coffee, observing the easy way Richard had integrated himself into the community that had supported Elena through her darkest times. This was Richard's world now too, not the sterile elegance of expensive hotels and exclusive parties, but the warm chaos of people who cared about each other and celebrated each other's successes. Richard had chosen this world, chosen Elena's world, and he seemed genuinely happier for it. Elena, Miguel said, appearing at her side with a piece of cake, can I tell you something? Of course. I used to worry that you would never have a life of your own. I used to feel guilty that you had given up so much to take care of me. Miguel looked over at Richard, who was now being taught traditional Italian gestures by Mrs. Rosa's elderly father. But watching you with Richard, watching you go back to school, seeing you plan for the future, I realize you were not giving up your life for me. You were just waiting for the right time to start living it. Elena hugged her brother, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for everything that had brought them to this moment. Miguel, you saved my life too. Taking care of you taught me how to love unconditionally. It taught me that family is worth any sacrifice. And it brought Richard into our lives. So we saved each other, Miguel said with satisfaction. Just like family should. As the evening wound down and the restaurant began to empty, Elena found herself standing outside with Richard, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city light pollution. Richard, she said, a year ago I thought my life was just about surviving until Miguel got better. I never imagined I could have all this. All what? Love. Hope. A future that includes dreams instead of just duties. Elena turned to face Richard. You gave me back my life. Elena, Richard said seriously, you gave me a life worth living. Before I met you, I had success but no purpose. I had money but no meaning. You and Miguel showed me what really matters. Elena stood on her toes and kissed Richard gently, tasting the sweet wine from dinner and something else, the flavor of happiness, of belonging, of home. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, Richard replied. Both of you. You are my family now. As they walked home through the quiet streets, Elena realized that Miguel was right. She had not given up her life to save her brother. She had simply been preparing for the life she was meant to live, learning the lessons about love and sacrifice and resilience that would make her ready for everything that was coming next. Tomorrow she would start planning the foundation with Richard. Next spring she would graduate with her business degree. Someday soon Miguel would transfer to the university and begin his career as a teacher. But tonight, Elena was simply grateful to be walking home with the man she loved, knowing that her brother was safe and healthy and happy, feeling for the first time in her adult life that the future held more promise than fear. 1 year later, Elena stood in the garden of City General Hospital where she had spent so many frightening nights watching over Miguel. But today was different. Today she was wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of flowers from Mrs. Rosa's garden, waiting for Miguel to walk her down the aisle to marry the man who had become the center of her world. The wedding was small and intimate, just the way Elena had wanted it. Mrs. Rosa and her family were there, along with several of Miguel's friends from college and a few of Richard's employees who had become genuine friends over the past year. Richard had suggested they could have a large ceremony at one of the city's luxury hotels, but Elena had insisted on something simpler and more meaningful. You ready for this? Miguel asked, appearing at Elena's side in the new suit Richard had bought him for the occasion. I have never been more ready for anything in my life, Elena replied, adjusting Miguel's tie with the same caring attention she had given him throughout his childhood and illness. Miguel looked healthy and strong, his face filled out and his color good. He was starting his junior year at the State University in the fall, majoring in education with a focus on working with children facing serious illnesses. His own experience had given him a unique perspective and a deep compassion that his professors said would make him an exceptional teacher. Elena, Miguel said seriously, I need to tell you something before we do this. Elena looked at her brother with concern. What is it? I need to thank you. For everything. For sacrificing your own dreams to save my life. For never giving up on me even when things looked hopeless. For showing me what real love looks like. Miguel's voice was thick with emotion. And I need to tell you that I am proud of the woman you have become. Mom and Dad would be so proud. Elena felt tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. Miguel, you do not need to thank me. You're my brother. I love you. I know. And because I love you too, I need you to know that you can stop worrying about me now. I am healthy, I am happy, and I am going to be fine. You do not have to take care of me anymore, Elena. You can just be my sister and my friend. Elena hugged Miguel tightly, feeling the symbolic weight of his words. For 8 years she had been part mother, part provider, part protector to Miguel. Learning to step back and let him be an independent adult was one of the hardest adjustments she had made in the past year. I will always worry about you, Elena said with a tearful laugh. That is what sisters do. I know. But Elena, you can worry about me while also living your own life. You can worry about me while building a marriage and a career and dreams of your own. The music started then, a simple acoustic guitar playing the song Elena had chosen, not a traditional wedding march, but a melody that reminded her of the tune she used to hum while working in Richard's kitchen, back when she thought he was just her employer and she was just trying to survive each day. Miguel offered Elena his arm. Come on, sister. Let's go get you married. They walked slowly down the garden path toward the small gazebo where Richard was waiting. Elena saw Richard's face light up when he spotted her, and she felt her heart flutter the same way it had the night of their first dinner at Rosa's restaurant. Richard looked handsome in his dark suit, but more than that, he looked happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way Elena had never seen him look during the formal events of his old life. Standing beside him was his best man, surprisingly, Dr. Martinez, the oncologist who had treated Miguel. Over the past year, Richard and Dr. Martinez had become close friends, bonding over their shared commitment to helping families facing medical crises. When Miguel and Elena reached the gazebo, Miguel placed Elena's hand in Richard's and stepped back to take his place as Elena's only wedding attendant. We are gathered here today, began the officiant, a friend of Mrs. Rosa's who had agreed to perform the ceremony, to celebrate the marriage of Elena and Richard, two people who found love in the midst of life's greatest challenges. Elena looked into Richard's eyes as the officiant spoke about love and commitment and the choice to build a life together. She thought about everything that had brought them to this moment: Miguel's illness, the loan sharks, the night Richard had followed her and witnessed her breakdown in that parking lot. What had seemed like the worst period of her life had actually been the beginning of the best. Elena, the officiant said, do you take Richard to be your husband, to love and support him through whatever challenges and joys life brings you? I do, Elena said clearly, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Richard, do you take Elena to be your wife, to love and support her through whatever challenges and joys life brings you? I do, Richard replied, his voice strong and certain. They exchanged rings, simple bands that Richard had chosen specifically because Elena had mentioned she preferred classic designs to flashy displays of wealth. As Richard slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, she remembered the night he had first told her he wanted to help, the night she had been too proud and too scared to accept his offer. By the power vested in me, the officiant announced, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Richard, you may kiss your bride. Richard kissed Elena gently, sweetly, while their small group of loved ones erupted in cheers and applause. Mrs. Rosa was crying and taking pictures, Miguel was grinning from ear to ear, and Dr. Martinez was already planning the toast he would give at the reception. After the ceremony, they moved to Rosa's restaurant for dinner and dancing. Elena had worried that Richard would miss having a more elaborate reception, but as she watched him dancing enthusiastically to the Italian folk music Mrs. Rosa's son was playing, she realized he was exactly where he wanted to be. Mrs. Coleman, Richard said, spinning Elena around the small dance floor, how does it feel to be married? Perfect, Elena replied. How does it feel to be married to your former housekeeper? Richard stopped dancing and looked at Elena seriously. Elena, you were never just my housekeeper. You were the woman who made my house a home, who brought meaning to my life, who taught me what real love looks like. You were the woman I was going to fall in love with no matter what circumstances brought us together. Elena felt tears starting again, happy tears that seemed to come easily these days. I love you, husband. I love you too, wife. Later that evening, as the reception was winding down, Elena found herself talking with Dr. Martinez about the foundation she and Richard had officially launched 6 months earlier. The Rodriguez-Coleman Foundation had already helped 12 families cover medical expenses for children with serious illnesses, and they were planning to expand their services to include educational scholarships for family members who had sacrificed their own schooling to care for sick relatives. Elena, Dr. Martinez said, I have to tell you something. In 20 years of practicing oncology, I have seen a lot of families torn apart by the stress of serious illness. But I have never seen anything like what you and Miguel have. The love between you two, the way you supported each other through everything. It was actually part of what helped Miguel heal. Elena looked over at Miguel, who was teaching Mrs. Rosa's granddaughter how to play chess. Miguel saved my life just as much as I saved his. That is what family does, Dr. Martinez said. And now you have built an even bigger family. Elena looked around the restaurant at all the people who had gathered to celebrate her wedding: Mrs. Rosa and her extended family, Miguel's friends from college, Richard's employees who had become genuine friends, Dr. Martinez and several other medical professionals who had volunteered to help with the foundation. Yes, Elena agreed. We have. As the evening came to an end, Elena and Richard said goodbye to their guests and prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a simple week at a cabin in the mountains where they could hike and read and plan their future without any distractions. Miguel hugged Elena goodbye, holding her tight for a long moment. I am proud of you, sister, he whispered. You deserve all this happiness. We both do, Elena replied. Miguel, you are going to do amazing things with your life. I cannot wait to see what kind of teacher you become. And I cannot wait to see what kind of world changer you become, Miguel replied with a grin. As Richard and Elena drove away from the restaurant, Elena looked back to see Miguel waving from the doorway, surrounded by the chosen family they had built together. In the morning, Miguel would move into the small apartment near the university that Richard had helped him find. Elena would come home from her honeymoon to begin her senior year of college while working part-time with the foundation. Richard would continue building his company into something that reflected their shared values. They were all moving forward into new phases of their lives, but they were doing it together, connected by love and shared experience and the knowledge that family is not just about blood relations but about the people who choose to stand by you through life's worst storms and biggest celebrations. Richard, Elena said as they drove through the quiet city streets, a year and a half ago, I thought my biggest dream was just to keep Miguel alive until he turned 20. I never imagined I could have all this. All what? Richard asked, though he was smiling because he had asked her the same question before. A husband who loves me. A brother who is healthy and happy. A career that matters. A future full of possibilities. Elena reached over and took Richard's hand. A family that chose each other instead of just being born into each other. Elena, Richard said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently, we are just getting. Elena leaned back in her seat and watched the city lights blur past the window, feeling a peace and contentment she had never imagined possible. Richard was right, they were just getting started. But for the first time in her adult life, Elena was not afraid of what the future might bring. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Dear readers, thank you so much for taking this emotional journey with Elena, Richard, and Miguel. Their story reminds us that sometimes our greatest challenges can lead to our most beautiful blessings. Love truly does have the power to transform lives and bridge any divide. I would love to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in Elena and Richard's love story? Did Miguel's wisdom and strength inspire you as much as it inspired me while writing this? And what do you think Elena and Richard's foundation will accomplish in the years to come? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement means the world to storytellers like me, and I read every single comment with joy and gratitude.